I'm different, I don't care who knows it. Something about me is not the same yet.
Pick a little, talk a little, pick a little, talk a little, cheap, 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 talk a lot, pick a little more.
I have been listening to Pete and his song and dance for 20-something years.
And dance.
Hello, I'm from the federal government. What illegal drugs have you taken in the last 6 months? I don't have to please another human being in order to eat. This is simply how long I've been retired. If I say Schedule 1, does everybody here know what I mean? Have you noticed there's more gay people around now than there was 10 years ago? My father told me, my mother used to say, in every audience I talk to, I divide into 4 groups.
As a lawyer, I'm supposed to be in court, but instead I spent a lot of time hiding out with him at his house. And let me tell you that from what I've seen and learned from him, not one person sitting in that auditorium today, and many of the national initiatives that are underway, would not be there if it wasn't for the efforts of Peter Christ. Peter, you're a great man. You have done an amazing job, and thank you.
Pick a little, talk a little, pick a little, talk a little, cheap, 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 talk a lot.
We have a lot of great speakers in law enforcement against prohibition, but Peter really set himself apart. He was something special. He could walk into any room, and no matter where that audience came from, in terms of their thoughts about drug prohibition, after listening to Peter for about 20 minutes, they'd all be nodding their heads in agreement. And then he'd wrap up, and he always asked, if anybody would like to join our organization, just come up to the podium. And he would consistently, over and over, consistently get 20 to 25% of any audience, sometimes more, joining law enforcement against prohibition. That was special. Nobody else could do that.
Pick a little, talk a little, pick a little, talk a little, cheap, 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 talk a lot, pick a little more.
Having that policeman, that former policeman, speaking about legalizing drugs, back then was a big deal. A good friend, a dear friend, and the movement will miss him, but I think now we have enough momentum, thanks largely to his efforts, that we're succeeding.
I thought that an organization like that, for law enforcement people to speak out against the drug war, would have also a voice that would be listened to in this drug policy debate that we're trying to have in this country. This mythical organization that I had in my head needed to find somebody, and finally a guy by the name of Jack Cole stepped over and took the reins as executive director at an organization called Marijuana Policy Project. Put $50,000 on the table last March. Jack Cole, myself, a guy by the name of John Gator, and a guy by the name of Howard Wooldridge stepped forward and put together a grant proposal, and we won the grant. And we have been building this organization since then. This is our first speaking trip tour with this. We plan on doing much more of this. We have roughly 300, about 200 law enforcement officers at this point, and about 100 people that have signed up as friends and supporters, okay, that are from different lines of work. This is our first speaking thing that we're going out. We're hoping to see this thing grow. We have a drug policy in America. The name we've given it is the War on Drugs. It's a wonderful term, war on drugs, but it doesn't define the policy. There's another term that defines the policy perfectly. And when I say what it is, you're going to know why they didn't title it this. The word is prohibition. We prohibit manufacture, we prohibit growing, we prohibit importation, we prohibit possession. We even go so far with this prohibition of prohibiting the amount you have in your bloodstream. If you leave this room disagreeing with me completely on what I have to say, at least leave this room today knowing that when you use the term prohibition in the future, you are not talking about a historical event. You are talking about the times you live in. The ones against murder, robbery, and rape do not create more murders, robberies, and rapes. On the other hand, the laws against the consensual crimes create more crime. They did a study in New York City in the early 90s, and this was a federal government study. They determined that 85% of the drug-related violence was associated with the marketplace. When Benjamin Franklin wrote back to the colonies and said, as much as we talk about freedom, at least over here in England, where he was visiting at the time, I could walk down the street on a Sunday morning whistling and not fear arrest. We've been doing this from the beginning of this country, trying to censor people's personal behavior. Here's the shocker. Prohibition doesn't work. Not only doesn't it work, it never worked in the history of our species. We do not have one drug-free prison in America, and we can't keep drugs out of there. How do you expect to keep them out of a free society? It isn't like they're not available. They're available in the worst of all possible circumstances. We have children selling drugs to children in this country. We're in Colombia now because of drugs. We're over in Afghanistan now chasing opium poppies. Now, we used to only chase cocaine down in South America because they didn't grow opium there. They do now. Drugs are as bad, if not worse, than you think they are. They're a very serious problem in our society. This is not about being cool. Legalization of drugs is not condoning drug use. Legalization of drugs is not an answer to our drug problem. When the lottery started, the numbers racket went in the toilet. Because what we did with the numbers racket was we legalized it. And now we don't have children running numbers for the mob. And is gambling still dangerous? Oh yeah, it didn't become benign. Drugs do not cause behavior. Alcohol does not cause violence. It's a very dangerous substance. How many people think we should bring back alcohol prohibition? You know what everybody says to me? Why, that would be worse. My point? I think we can all agree we can't make drugs go away. No matter how deep the hole, you can't hide from them. What we can do is learn to live with them so they do the least amount of harm possible. If we legalize drugs, we gain the ability to regulate and control them. When you prohibit something, you lose all ability to regulate and control it. If that product was licensed by the growers to grow, purchased by manufacturers in this country, shipped into this country, and manufactured into a saleable item, sold in this country, we would be able to track every dollar where it goes. Because it isn't drugs that support terrorism, contrary to the popular ads on television. It is America's drug policy that supports terrorism. And we can change that. Because I haven't read any reports that said Budweiser or Marlboro are sending money to terrorist organizations. These are certainly drug dealers, nicotine and alcohol. We've reduced the amount of adult cigarette smokers by 50% over the last 10 years in this country. Have quit. We guarantee them as much as possible a purity of product, don't we? We license and bond the manufacturers. We make sure they label it, put the dosage on, say what's inside the bottle before so you can look and see. And we also, as much as possible, give the alcoholic a safe place to purchase and use their product in. For instance, if I'm a heroin addict, I'll tell you what I'm going to say and be honest about it. Why don't you help me like you're helping the alcoholic? Why don't you make sure, as much as you can, that I don't have overdoses by making sure my product is pure so I know what I'm getting when I'm buying it? Why don't you leave me alone if I'm not hurting other people and other people's property? Leave me alone. And why don't you provide me with treatment without having to admit that I'm a criminal before I can access the treatment? That one of the threats of the dries, that's what they call the prohibitionists during the alcohol period, was that if you legalize alcohol, everybody will become a drunk. And we legalized alcohol in '33, and this drunk and stupid, stumbling nation made it through the Depression, won World War II, created the greatest economic power that's ever existed on the planet. And you're caught on the streets of Rome with 3 ounces of heroin, they send you on your way, that's personal possession. They catch you with 3 ounces of heroin on the streets of New York City, and it's 20 years to life. The Europeans are far ahead of us on this. We should be ashamed, actually. There's a lot of us out here. I get cops that are at these things, they'll come up, they won't say anything publicly, but they'll come up afterwards, and the most common phrase I hear is, get us out of this. This is not our job. Law enforcement's job is to protect you people from each other. It is not the job of law enforcement to protect you from yourself. And we are incapable of doing it. Family, education, healthcare, and religions are the structures in our society that are designed to help you deal with your personal demons, not the criminal justice system. Are there any questions?